The day had started like any other for Dinah, a waitress at a quiet cafe tucked away from the bustling streets. The warm scent of espresso blended with the faint sweetness of freshly baked pastries, and yet the atmosphere was unusually calm for an afternoon. The cafe was mostly empty, the sound of clinking cutlery echoing through the otherwise still room. Dinah, on her feet for hours, felt every second stretch out. The clock seemed to mock her, moving so slowly as the hum of background conversation faded to nothing. Tips had been scarce, small coins left behind without a second glance from the distracted customers. The bills that loomed over her head, unpaid rent, and an overdue phone bill, weighed heavy on her mind. With a sigh, she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear and grabbed her order pad, her feet aching from the long shift. Then, the bell above the door jingled, pulling her from her tired thoughts. A young man walked in, tall and composed, dressed simply but with an air of effortless elegance. He was followed by two others, whom Dinah assumed were bodyguards. It wasn't often the cafe saw high-profile guests, much less someone who seemed to have a personal security team. For a moment, Dinah froze, her pen hovering above her notepad. But quickly, professionalism kicked in, and she forced herself to walk over to the table where he had settled, trying to shake off the unease building in her chest. "Good afternoon," she greeted him, trying to muster the best smile she could, though her mind was racing. The young man looked up, and for a brief moment, Dinah couldn't place where she had seen him before. His calm expression, the way he carried himself, it was all so familiar. Then it hit her. Barron Trump, the son of the former president. Her heart skipped a beat, but she quickly pushed aside any nerves. He was just another customer, no more, no less. "I'll just have a cappuccino and one of those croissants," he replied softly, his voice polite but reserved. It was nothing out of the ordinary, and yet there was something about him, maybe the sincerity in his voice or the calm in his demeanor, that made Dinah pause for a moment. She nodded, scribbling down the order and turning back to the counter. As she prepared his cappuccino, Dinah couldn't help but glance back over at his table. Why was she feeling this strange flutter in her stomach? Barron Trump, of all people, why was she acting this way? Maybe it was the exhaustion from the long shift or the nerves of meeting someone so familiar. But as she placed the cappuccino and croissant in front of him, she noticed the way he looked up and smiled, the kindness in his eyes. "Thank you," he said softly. Dinah smiled back, muttering a quick, "You're welcome," and moved back toward the counter. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the way his gaze lingered, not in an intrusive way, but as if he was actually seeing her. It made her feel self-conscious. She tried to shake it off, but couldn't deny the feeling. Time seemed to stretch as the afternoon wore on. Dinah busied herself, refilling sugar containers, clearing tables, but her mind kept returning to the table in the corner. Barron was still there, quietly sipping his water and gazing out the window, lost in thought. When he finished his meal, she noticed him pull out a pen, scribbling something on the receipt. He folded it neatly and tucked it under the empty coffee cup. Then he stood up, gathering his things. "Thank you for coming," Dinah called out, her voice soft as he passed by. Barron turned, offering a slight smile. "Have a good day." His words lingered in the air, and for a moment, Dinah was frozen, watching him leave with his security close behind. The bell above the door jingled once more, and the cafe was quiet again. Dinah exhaled, the tension in her chest slowly releasing as she moved to clear the table. As she picked up the coffee cup, her eyes caught the receipt. She unfolded it, expecting to see the usual tip, but her breath caught in her throat when she saw the number. It was a tip so generous, so large, that her stomach turned, and beneath it, in neat handwriting, were words that struck her to the core. "Your kindness and hard work don't go unnoticed. My family has been where you are. Stay strong. Brighter days are coming." Tears welled up in Dinah's eyes as she read the note again, slower this time, letting every word sink in. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words. For months, she had been treading water, working herself to the bone just to get by. And in that moment, she felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in a long time. The tears fell freely, and her knees weakened as she collapsed into the chair across from where Barron had sat. The note wasn't just a tip. It was a message of empathy, a small act of kindness that would carry her through the coming days. Her manager approached, concern in her eyes. "You okay?" she asked, her voice gentle. Dinah wiped her tears quickly, stuffing the note into her apron pocket. "I'm fine," she said, her voice shaky. "Just a really generous tip." Her manager raised an eyebrow, clearly not convinced. "Generous enough to make you cry?" she asked, and Dinah nodded, managing a weak laugh. She reached for the receipt, showing it to her manager. When her boss saw the amount, her eyes widened. "Who left this?" "Corner table," Dinah answered, her voice softer now. "That was Barron Trump." Her manager blinked in surprise. "The Barron Trump?" Dinah nodded, pulling the note from her pocket. She handed it over carefully, almost as if it were fragile. Her manager read the words, her expression softening for the first time in months. "Wow," she whispered. "That's something else." "Yeah," Dinah replied, folding the note back up, holding it like a treasure. "I don't even know why he wrote it. I didn't do anything special." Her manager gave her a long look. "Sometimes people just know, Dinah. They can see what you're going through, even when you think you're hiding it. You're here every day, working your tail off, always kind to customers, even the ones who don't deserve it." Maybe he saw that. Dinah swallowed hard, her throat tight. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that. For months, she had been pushing herself to the limit, always putting others first, but never taking time for herself. She had been kind because it was the only thing she could hold on to in the chaos. As the minutes passed, a buzz filled the cafe. Whispers spread among the staff, and soon, one of the baristas approached her. "You served him, right?" the girl asked, excitement in her voice. "What did he say? Was he nice?" "Yeah," Dinah said faintly. "He was really nice." The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Every interaction felt lighter, and by the end of the day, when Dinah walked out, she kept the folded note safe in her pocket. The next morning, as the first light of day barely peeked through her window, her phone buzzed, and she groaned, rolling over to check it. Her screen was flooded with dozens of messages. "Is this you? You're famous." She clicked on one, her heart racing as she saw the headline. "Barron Trump leaves Waitress a touching note and a huge tip." The article told her story word for word, complete with a photo of the note. Her heart dropped as she scrolled through the reactions. The note had gone viral, shared across social media. Strangers, people who knew nothing about her life, were now discussing her in ways she hadn't anticipated. She closed her eyes, the weight of it all settling in. She wasn't ready for her story to be everyone's story. At the cafe that day, things felt different. Her co-workers greeted her with smiles that seemed to hold more meaning than before, and the regulars looked at her with curiosity. Her manager joked that she was a local hero now, but Dinah didn't feel like one. She was just a waitress. But as she worked, the buzz of the day seemed to shift something within her. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a symbol of kindness, and that had made all the difference. By the time her shift ended, Dinah slipped out the back door, away from the reporters who had gathered outside. The moment her sneakers hit the pavement, she exhaled deeply, the weight of the attention momentarily lifting. It was a quiet walk home, but even in the stillness, something had changed within her. The kindness she had received from an unexpected place had begun to reshape her world. As Dana walked through the quiet streets on her way home, she could feel the weight of the day settling over her. The sensation of being under the world's watchful gaze made every step feel heavier. Her phone buzzed incessantly, notifications flooding in with every passing minute. She had received calls, messages, and even emails, all from people she didn't know, asking for interviews or offering congratulations. The constant stream of attention felt like a tidal wave that she wasn't prepared for, and it seemed like no matter how much she tried to block it out, it was always there, looming in the background. The quiet street, with its dim streetlights casting long shadows, offered her a brief escape. She tried to focus on the sound of her footsteps, the familiar rhythm of her sneakers hitting the pavement. It was grounding somehow. Her thoughts wandered back to that note, the words Barron had written with such care. Your kindness and hard work don't go unnoticed. She couldn't help but repeat those words over and over again in her head. For the first time in a long time, Dana felt like someone truly saw her, not just as a waitress, a faceless person behind the counter, but as someone worthy of empathy, of recognition. As she entered her apartment building, she felt a momentary relief. The world outside felt distant, as if it belonged to someone else. She climbed the stairs to her apartment, her legs tired from the long day, her mind restless. When she opened the door, she was met by the familiar sight of her small, modest space, a place that had been her sanctuary for so long. Her mother's cough echoed from the other room, and Dana's heart tightened. The weight of everything she was juggling, the bills, her mom's health, the constant pressure to survive, came rushing back. She sat down at her small kitchen table, the receipt still folded neatly in her pocket. As she pulled it out and unfolded it again, she stared at the handwritten note, almost as if she could make sense of everything by simply reading it one more time. Barron Trump didn't owe her anything. He didn't need to care. But somehow he did. And it wasn't just the money. It was the words, the kindness, the empathy, the understanding. She felt like she had been given a glimpse into a world that was so much bigger than her own struggles. Dana took a deep breath, trying to push away the overwhelming emotions that threatened to spill over. She had a lot to process. What did this all mean? How had her life gone from being a quiet, unnoticed waitress to a viral sensation? What would happen next? And most importantly, what did she do with this sudden outpouring of attention? Her phone buzzed again, and she glanced at the screen. It was another message, this time from a coworker who had seen the news. You're a hero now. Everyone's talking about you. The words felt hollow in her hands, and she put the phone down with a sigh. She wasn't a hero. She was just a woman trying to survive, doing the best she could under difficult circumstances. Nothing more, nothing less. The next morning, as Dana walked to work, the world seemed different. The streets that had always felt ordinary were now filled with whispers and stares. She could sense the attention before it even reached her. People looked at her differently, as if they knew something she didn't. It was an uncomfortable feeling, like walking into a room full of strangers who already knew all your secrets. When she arrived at the cafe, the atmosphere had changed. It wasn't just the usual buzz of patrons sipping their coffee or chatting in the corner. There was a different energy in the air, a tension that Dana couldn't quite place. Her coworkers gave her knowing smiles, some even offering congratulatory words that felt insincere, as if they were saying what they thought she wanted to hear rather than what they genuinely felt. Dana forced a smile in return, but inside, she was a storm of confusion. As she tied her apron and got into the rhythm of her shift, Dana found herself avoiding the topic that seemed to dominate every conversation. A customer would ask about the note, a coworker would mention it, and Dana would brush it off with a simple, "It's no big deal." But deep down it was a big deal. Her life had changed in an instant, and she wasn't sure how to navigate this new reality. She wasn't ready to be a symbol of kindness or empathy. She didn't want to be someone's feel-good story. Around noon, the first signs of the media circus began. A news crew arrived outside, cameras set up, microphones ready. They were there to interview her, to ask her about the moment that had captured the world's attention. Dana's stomach turned as she watched them. She had never imagined that her ordinary life would become the subject of such intense scrutiny. She tried to focus on her work, clearing tables, serving coffee, doing what she always did. But it was impossible to ignore the growing presence of the media, the reporters who were now circling the cafe like vultures, waiting for their next story. At the end of her shift, Dana couldn't take it anymore. She ducked out of the cafe's back door, avoiding the reporters who were now camped outside, ready to pounce on the next person who dared to speak. Her sneakers hit the pavement once again, and for the first time that day, she felt a sense of relief. The quiet streets welcomed her, and she let herself breathe in the cool evening air. But even as she walked home, the world was still following her. The notifications on her phone were relentless. Messages from strangers, from friends, from family. all wanting to talk about the note, about the tip, about Barron Trump. She opened one message and read the words aloud to herself. "Your kindness saved her life." She shook her head, unable to comprehend the weight of that statement. She hadn't saved anyone's life. She had just done her job. But somehow, it felt like more than that now. That night, as Dana lay in bed, she realized that the attention wasn't going to stop. The world had seen her, and now there was no going back. The note had touched something deep inside of her, and it had done the same for so many others. Barron Trump's simple act of kindness had sparked a movement, a conversation about empathy and the power of small gestures. And now, Dana was at the center of it all. She closed her eyes, thinking about what she wanted to do with all of this. She could embrace the attention, use it to propel herself forward, or she could retreat and try to find a way back to her quiet, unnoticed life. She didn't know what the right answer was. All she knew was that she had been given a gift that came in the form of a note, a tip, and a moment of connection that had changed everything. But there was one thing Dana was certain of. She wasn't going to let this moment define her. She would carry the words of that note with her, but she would also carry the strength that had gotten her this far. She wasn't just the waitress who received a big tip. She was a woman who had fought for her family, for her survival, and for the dignity that came with doing her best every single day. And that, in itself, was a story worth telling. The next few days passed in a blur of interviews, social media posts, and messages from people who wanted to share their own stories of kindness. Dana found herself caught in a whirlwind she wasn't prepared for. But as she navigated this new chapter of her life, she kept one thing close to her heart: the note, and the reminder that kindness could change the world, one small gesture at a time. The media frenzy eventually died down, but the ripple effect of that day continued to spread. Dana's story was no longer just about her. It was about everyone who had ever felt unseen, unheard, or unnoticed. It was a story of empathy, of human connection, and the power of simple kindness to heal and uplift. And in the end, that was the most powerful thing of all. As the days turned into weeks, Dana's life took on an unfamiliar rhythm. The initial wave of media attention had faded, but the undercurrent of recognition was still there. Everywhere she went, people seemed to know her face. Some gave her smiles of admiration, others simply stared with curiosity. It wasn't that they recognized her for her accomplishments or her potential. No, they recognized her because she had become part of a larger narrative, one of kindness, empathy, and a reminder that sometimes it's the small, seemingly insignificant actions that change the world. Dana continued to work at the cafe, though now her presence there was marked by a quiet tension. She felt as though she were walking through a fog, unable to fully engage in the work she had once found comforting, yet unwilling to leave. The cafe had always been her safe space, a place where she could forget the world and focus on serving coffee and clearing tables. But now, every shift felt like a performance. She had become a symbol, whether she wanted it or not, and the pressure was building. One afternoon, as she wiped down a table by the window, a young woman approached her. Dana looked up and smiled, instinctively greeting the customer. But the woman didn't sit down. Instead, she hesitated for a moment before speaking. "You're Dana, right?" she asked softly, her eyes searching Dana's face. Dana nodded. "Yes, that's me. How can I help you?" "I saw your story on the news. About the tip." "About Barron Trump," the woman continued, her voice low and reverent. I wanted to thank you." Dana felt a wave of discomfort wash over her. "Thank me? For what?" she asked, unsure where this conversation was going. The woman took a step closer, her hands clasped together in front of her. "For showing us that kindness still matters. For reminding us that even the smallest gesture can make a difference. You've inspired so many of us. I just wanted to say thank you." Dana blinked, taken aback. She wasn't used to being the one thanked. In fact, she wasn't used to being noticed at all. For most of her life, she had simply gone unnoticed, blending into the background, doing what she had to do to survive. She didn't know how to respond. The words were foreign to her. "It's not really a big deal," Dana muttered, looking away. "I just did my job, you know." But the woman smiled, a soft, knowing smile that made Dana feel exposed. "It's a big deal to us. To me. And I just wanted to make sure you know that." Before Dana could respond, the woman turned and walked away, leaving her standing there with a strange, hollow feeling in her chest. The woman's words echoed in her mind, and for the first time in weeks, Dana allowed herself to fully absorb the magnitude of the impact she had unwittingly had on others. She had been living her life in survival mode, simply trying to get by, and in doing so, she had somehow sparked a wave of kindness and gratitude. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't deserving of this praise, this attention. Dana spent the next few days reflecting on the encounter. She couldn't help but replay the woman's words over and over again. "It's a big deal to us." That's when it hit her. The note, the tip, Barron Trump's gesture. It wasn't about her at all. It was about something much bigger. It was about the kind of world people wanted to live in. A world where kindness wasn't just a rare occurrence, but a way of life. But the question lingered, what now? What was she supposed to do with this newfound role as a symbol of kindness? Dana knew she wasn't the hero everyone thought she was. She was just a woman, struggling with the same challenges as anyone else. But maybe, just maybe, she could use this platform to do something that truly mattered. The following weekend, Dana received a message that would change the course of her life once again. It was from a local nonprofit organization that focused on helping women and children in need. The organization had been following her story and wanted to meet with her to discuss a potential partnership. They believed that Dana's message of kindness and empathy could inspire others to get involved, to donate, and to volunteer. They wanted her to be their ambassador. At first, Dana wasn't sure how to respond. She had always kept her personal life separate from her work life, never wanting to draw attention to herself. But this opportunity felt different. This wasn't about fame or attention. It was about making a real, tangible difference in the lives of those who needed it most. Dana agreed to meet with the organization, and when she did, she was struck by how down-to-earth and genuine everyone was. They didn't want her to be a spokesperson or a figurehead. They simply wanted her to share her story, to show others that anyone, no matter where they came from, could make a difference. They believed that if Dana could inspire others with her simple act of kindness, it would create a ripple effect that would ultimately benefit the community as a whole. As Dana left the meeting, she couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose stirring within her. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was part of something bigger than herself. She wasn't just a waitress, a woman who had gotten lucky and had a viral moment. She was someone who could make a difference, who could use her story to inspire others to be kinder, to care more, and to look out for one another. It wasn't an easy decision. Dana was still trying to figure out her own life, her mother's health, her financial struggles, the pressure of being in the public eye. But in that moment, she knew that she had a choice. She could either retreat into her old life, or she could step forward and embrace the chance to use her newfound platform for good. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Dana began working with the nonprofit, sharing her story at local events and helping to raise awareness for their cause. She spoke to groups of women, encouraging them to take control of their own lives and reach out for help when they needed it. She visited schools, speaking to children about the importance of kindness and empathy. She even started a small online campaign, using social media to encourage people to perform random acts of kindness and share their experiences with others. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of people from all over the world joined in, sharing their own stories of kindness, their own small acts that had made a difference. Dana couldn't believe the impact her story was having. She had started with a simple, spontaneous act, a generous tip for a waitress, and now she was helping to create a global movement. One evening, as Dana sat on her couch, scrolling through the messages of support and gratitude flooding her inbox, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. It wasn't the attention that mattered anymore. It wasn't the media coverage, or the recognition, or the fame. It was the knowledge that she had made a real difference. She had inspired others to be better, to do better, and that was something she could hold on to forever. As she thought about the path that had led her here, Dana smiled. She had started as just a regular woman, working hard to make ends meet, struggling with her own challenges. But in the end, she had become something more. She had become a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in a world that often feels cold and indifferent, small acts of kindness still have the power to change everything. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was the greatest gift of all.